All right. Hi, guys. We made it. I can't believe it's Sunday, March 22nd. It has been a heck of a week. Oh my gosh. And before I introduce Sabrina, who's on with us today, I'll let you guys know if you don't know who I am. I'm Allison Feening. I'm a licensed independent social worker. I'm the owner of Pinpoint Behavioral Health, a life coach, and advisor for different fire and police departments. And I'm the creator of the online free community for first responders and spouses called Triumph Over Trauma. Um, and every day we put content out. We put content out for first responders and spouses to stay connected, to learn something, to develop a skill. And we have people that come into the group that also teach. And why I've asked Sabrina to kind of come on today is because, and I can't wait for, like, I'm so excited that she agreed to do this because we have had a tragedy happen and she's going to discuss that. And she is such an amazing person to discuss this and for us to really discuss the different minefield and how to navigate that after tragedy. But again, before I do that, I want to know where's everyone listening in from? Where are we tuning in from? What part of the state or what part of the country are we tuning in from? Are you in Cincinnati? Are you in Ohio? Are you in California? Let us know in the comments. The other thing is, with everything that's happened, we want to thank you all for being here. And we want to compliment you. And it can be so hard to see some positives in all of the crap that's happened. So we want you to know we thank you. And we also want you to give yourself a compliment and post a compliment for something that you've done today, whether it's you got out of bed, you went to work, or you made time just for this broadcast. So without further ado, Sabrina is, I'm so excited that literally you were like, yes, let's do this, like everything lined up. Sabrina, guys, I actually has become kind of a really awesome confidant and friend and colleague. She is a what's called an LPCC, or a licensed professional clinical counselor. She is one of my I guess we just started working together and doing she does lots of different things. And so Sabrina, tell us a little bit about you and what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so Reader's Digest version. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor, and I actually specifically became a counselor. How long has this been? 5 years ago, specifically to work with military and first responders. So I was already a little different from the beginning,
We
and
tend to be that way.
I know, right? I like it that way. So within that, I would say pretty quickly after I graduated, I started hanging out around a fire department and went on a year and a half of ride-alongs with them. And then after a year and a half of ride-alongs, I was like, this is fun. So I went on to become an EMT basic myself, and then after that became a wilderness EMT through the National Outdoor Leadership School. And then
Incredible.
yeah, so I really like outdoor stuff. I really like part of what I do in my clinical work is equine therapy. So I'm not really that great at sitting still, shocker. Um, but then after a year and a half of ride-alongs and becoming a super volunteer EMT, what I like to tell people is that I'm trained in that, and in my scope right now, I don't have too much time to practice that, but I do it when I can.
Yeah.
I became a mobile crisis responder in our area. So what that is a mental health professional who responds with police to mental health emergencies. Um, my position was a little different, and then I was actually housed in a police department.
Oh,
So
I didn't
the
realize
guys,
that.
yeah. So
Huh.
literally, where they had roll call, where they processed their reports, where everything went
Hmm.
down, my office was right there in the thick of it. So it was such a good experience for me because you get to know the guys and girls real quick, the culture, everything. So I was there for a year and a half. And what I realized in that year and a half is I absolutely love working with first responders. And that's what I want to do specifically. And now, kind of where I am in my career path is I have to be careful how I word this, but I work with military on a military base, but I'm not in the military.
Right, you're
So
a civilian contractor.
yeah, so infer that how you want. It's kind of neat how the pieces have fallen together like that.
Right,
Um,
right.
so I definitely have experience in all three of them, and to know that like this is what I want to do. This is absolutely what I want to do. Um,
Right. And when we met, that was what was so cool about you and I is that I'm the same way because I've worked at the VA, police, fire, all three realms, and it's um, very rare to find somebody who has had experience as a clinician in all three realms of the first responder and EMS dispatch, like all those realms. So um, that's why I think you and I were like, oh my gosh, we're like clinical soul sisters.
yes. And I actually think it's pretty important to describe how we met. So we met at um, Chip Terry at his regional event to bring about awareness for mental health issues for first responders in the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky area. So
Yes.
I got connected with Joe Terry, and that is actually how Allison and I met was that day. So it was a really, I don't know, that day was so interesting to me. And looking back, I think it's so critical to have events like that and just to get support in that way because you never know who's out there until you have events like that.
Right. And one of the things that you taught on was not only like, PTSD and all the stress, but also talking about your wilderness experience and doing EMDR and equine therapy. So, and that's what you bringing to now as we work together with Pinpoint. Coming on board with us is providing that service because it is an eclectic service. It is something very different, and it's working.
Yes. Yes. I think that's actually really why I enjoy equine therapy and I enjoy EMDR is because it works, it's research based, but you're not going to be in counseling forever. Is you're going
Mm-mm.
to come in, you're going to meet in a safe place with someone you trust, with someone who gets it, and they're going to give you the tools that you need to get out there and be even stronger than you were before. And that's why I really enjoy these two approaches is it's not long lasting and it's strength based and it's just awesome.
Right, right. So just like being on a horse, right? Sometimes you may get thrown off.
Yes, yes, we
And,
do.
unfortunately, um, when we have things that happen to us, and maybe we can go and talk about why you and I decided to talk about tragedy today and the mind, navigating the minefield after tragedy. If you wanted to go into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, in our area, we had an officer that was killed in the line of duty. A lot of the details are still forthcoming, and the 10,000-foot view on this is that this happened in an already stressful time, but this is horrible that the thin blue line has been assaulted, and it is we're already in a pandemic, right? So we're already
Yeah.
stressed. This is adding another layer of tragedy upon the stress. In what can we do during this time to be realistic on what to expect and how can we support one another in this? And I think it's really important to have these conversations and to ask these questions because I think a lot of people are possibly feeling something that they're not even aware of what they're feeling or they possibly this is the first time, but also they could be feeling something and they're just waiting for someone to bring it up. They're just waiting for someone to ask these questions because they
Yeah.
might not have
Yeah.
the language.
Yes, absolutely. I actually was messaging a dispatcher earlier and she said, I said to her, I said, I know you probably don't even know what to say to this, and I'm but still going to ask, is there anything you need?
Yeah.
And, normally in after an event, we don't know what we need.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very common and very normal response to have. You have no idea.
Exactly. And I think I often describe, unfortunately, um, things like this happen, right? So I wish they didn't. I wish everything within me that these things didn't happen, but they do. And where we are right now is we are literally in the suck zone or the suck window. Um, and what do you need during that time? You need support. You need people there for you to say, hey, I'm here for you. How can I meet your basic needs? Literally. Have
So
you, have
how
you,
how yeah, so how like so 24 hours after an event we're in, what can somebody do 24 hours after an event that you've seen be helpful, be effective?
yeah, I think literally, this is a little different right now just because of where we are as a society. um, just showing up, just showing up to someone's house within reason and saying, hey, I'm here for you. Let's talk. What do you need? And even I think it's really important to put yourself in that person's shoes. Like, what would I be experiencing? What would I be feeling at this point in time? And how can I go above and beyond to meet their needs without even asking? Like dropping off meals, watching their kids, right? Just showing up to talk about it. Just say, we have to be in this together. Essentially, right now, you are each other's tourniquets. Like, how I look at this
Mm,
is this
oh,
is
I love
very
that.
it it's so true because I look at this as this is an injury. Um, it's an emotional injury, it's a moral injury in a way, and we have to be each other's tourniquets right now. Like there is no option. Like you're going to be each other's lifesavers. So what does that mean to stop the bleed? If you, because everyone handles things differently, but we have to be there for each other.
Absolutely. So if in this 24 hours, and I know we don't want to just show up, we may want to call them or,
Yes.
text message or even video time. They did just put out, I guess there's a State of the Union happening right now, and I said this is more important. um, that being social distancing and safe, and I get that, but at the same time, is if somebody's suffering after a tragedy, put a mask on then. If we need to be present, be in the same vicinity. And the other thing is, and I had this happen during my situation last night with all of this, is you feel like you don't know what to say, and sometimes you don't even need to say anything,
Yep.
and it's just saying I'm here and I'm present. And whatever you need, if you need a shoulder to cry on, if you need me to get you some water, if you need me to watch your kids, yeah. And they may not even know, but just the visibility of you is
Hmm.
really important.
I think that's so true. And often in counseling or therapy, we call that holding space. Just there doesn't have to be words because honestly, is that person they might remember what you say if you came up with something really profound or really meaningful or really encouraging. That's great. But often in those times, we just need to know that we're supported, and you don't have to say that with words. You don't. Like just your physical presence, or even being that we are in a shelter in place right now, we have to get a little creative and a little deliberate with it, right? But we live in the day
Yeah.
and age of technology. Of what does that mean to say, hey, we have got to FaceTime at 2 o'clock today for 20 minutes. Like, what is it? Or
And if you're not on there, I'm coming over or something, right?
something like that. Put your N95 on. I'm halfway kidding about that, but
Yeah, like whatever.
but
uh,
also I think there's going to be a resurgence in just seeing how good humanity can be. And what does that mean? Like dropping off notes of encouragement, like maybe even physical notes or emails or messages or whatever it is. But we're just going to have to get really creative with it.
right. So as that bleed slows down, right, as the tourniquet starts to not need to be turned so much, so as the days progress, and we think of um, the minefield or navigating that, what may some people start to notice? What may be some things we want them to be aware of?
Right. So it's going to be a little different for everyone. And I think it's really important to know yourself in all of this and to know what your stress reactions are. And maybe if you've never had that conversation or you've never written those down or you've never really processed what that is, I would say if you're grieving right now, not right now. But when you have a second, you got to get real with what your stress reactions are because what you want to be mindful of are the following minds, if you want to think of it like that. I really, as a therapist, I use this flagging the minefield activity all the time. But what could it be? Is it that you're snapping at your partner or your spouse even more?
Mm-hmm.
Are you drinking? Are you isolating? Are you avoiding? Are you, is your anger starting to get to another level, right? And we also have to take this in context that we're in a pandemic and we're in a shelter in place right now. So we're already going to have these a little bit exaggerated reactions anyways, but how can we
Mm-hmm.
keep them in check? How can we get in control of them? If there's one thing first responders are great at, it's being in control. So essentially
Or they
looking
think, or they think they are.
yes. So what does that look like to say, you know what, I'm going to get proactive about my grief, which is a little, it feels uncomfortable. It does, because grief is grief, right? It's
Yeah,
messy and it's not linear. And
and grief sucks.
yes, it sucks big
It,
time.
like you
But
said, we're in the stick of the suck right now.
yes, and it realistically, it might suck for a while. But I also think this is a good time for introspection to get real about, okay, there's been things I've been neglecting for a while, maybe thoughts, feelings, possibly relationships or lack thereof that I've been neglecting. And I have to get real about what that looks like, because sweeping it under the rug isn't going to work.
Will
Right.
you tell? Will you explain to people what introspect means?
Yeah. So introspect means the ability to look within and process your own emotions, your own thoughts without judging them. So what we know from shame research is no adaptive, healthy, positive behavior ever comes from judgment, shame, or guilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, as people, we have that neural highway paved out in our brain, and our we just know how to get there super quick. But we also have to be able to say that's not adaptive and that's not serving me anymore. So how can I look within to what's going on inside of me with curiosity and just be able to process what comes up? And maybe curiosity, maybe that word bugs you a little bit, but essentially not to be able to judge yourself or shove it back down, to say, all right, maybe I've been thinking this thought or I've been having this feeling for a while. How can I increase my window of tolerance around it and just sit with it for a little bit and it not eat
Yeah.
me up?
Yeah. That's a great way to explain that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if somebody kind of looks and, opens up their skull like they're Men in Black and looks inside of themselves, getting their introspect of themselves and really non-judgmentally taking a glimpse of all their layers and chapters inside them, and noticing how they are responding to things, either their physiological response, their behavior response, right? And as you and I know, your physiological response comes first.
Mm-hmm.
What can they expect, not only for themselves, but right now after tragedy within their department or the communication center or the people around them that may, or spouse, that may be something we want to be mindful of instead of trying to be afraid of.
Yeah, and I think it's, you invite that into the room, right? We use that we use that term as therapists a lot. Like when we notice something, you invite it in. Like you don't pretend it doesn't exist. Um,
Oh, I'm big on
so
that. I'm like, we're gonna do that right now. We're just gonna invite that in.
so I think it's important to be mindful of one of two things, because you're going to see even a combination of this is exaggerated emotional reactions, heightened emotions, heightened stress levels.
Mm-hmm.
So people spouting off, people saying things they don't necessarily mean, just you're going to see a lot of different things. All behavior communicates something. And what is this person's behavior communicating? And is that, these people that you work with, right? Is that
Right.
them or is it something else?
Is
And
it the
or
hurt, the pain, the grief, the shame, the whatever?
exactly. Or on the flip side of that is isolation and avoidance, the shutdown, right? That, you know what, this is just too much. I'm just not going to deal with it. And there's a difference between not dealing with it right now and not dealing with it, period. And I think that's really important. And I will say, for police, I think an adaptive thing to do would just be invite this into your roll call to say like, hey, what's your thought process? How's everyone doing? And that's how I would word it as a counselor. Obviously, not everyone's going to word it like that, but just bring it into the room, because if we don't, what is that? That's pressure that builds up literally within us. And we can only take so much
Mm-hmm.
pressure, that cumulative stress as people, and we're already under it right now. And so you have to get real, because I mean, police, fire, EMS dispatchers, they're all still working right now, and they're going to continue to work. And so that's just stress on top of tragedy. So we have to
Yeah.
bring it into the room.
And one of the biggest minds that or bonds that can be tragic after this is how leadership takes
Yes.
it and what leadership does with their crew and their teams and their departments. So you and I have talked heavily on this topic because we've, talked to leaderships after different events, or we try to be proactive with your hold the line services. We try to be proactive and teach how to handle after a crisis event or a tragic event. So what can a leader, if a leader is not sure what to do, what advice or what have you seen be effective or helpful to navigating these minds to feel in control when all of their people, maybe like you said, they're saying things or doing things because they're in grief and they're not sure what to do? What can those leaders do?
Yeah, and I always like to refer back to how a police officer or how a paramedic or how a firefighter is trained is, what do you do in that situation when it happens on the job, right? When something happens that you don't know what to do or you're in over your head, what do? You call backup, right? So, what does backup look like for you? Does it mean calling someone like you or I? Does it mean calling people who have been this through this before? But I think most importantly, you have to approach your leadership as a position that could change someone's life, really.
Yes.
And how do you want them to be in a month from now, 5 months from now, 5 years from now? Because that all depends on how you handle this situation right now. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be with guilt, shame, or judgment. Like, those tactics might have a time and place at some point in the job, but not right now. So, what does it mean to say, you know what, for the mental health of my officers, I need to implement a protocol as to how to handle this, right? So, how are we going to process this as a team to where we're all mentally healthy after this is over? And what does that look like? And I would say time is of the essence. You have to act quickly with that. So, I think number one is having conversations around it, healthy conversations, adaptive conversations, um, and have them often. I'm not saying you have to process every single emotion, every single roll call. That's not what I'm saying.
You don't have
But
to bring in CSIM or CSID to everything, or you don't have to
exactly,
call in, the chaplain every time, right? It's starting just with a how you doing?
exactly. But really, how are you doing? Because we ask that question a million times in a day. How you doing? How you doing? Right? Or maybe even after one of those runs or one of those calls that stuff goes down and you just look at each other and you say, how you doing? But actually asking, how are you doing, and being okay with whatever comes your way, right? Because
Yeah.
we just need that space. We really do as people.
And that's one way as we navigate this minefield after tragedy is that the leaders can help their departments or their people feel in more control because that approach of, hey, we got you, we got your six, we've got, you can trust us, and not telling people, not spreading this person's having a tough time is also super important, right? Because if you break that, then that's a totally different thing.
Yeah, that's everything. Because I think instances like this has a chance to make your team infinitely stronger and infinitely better for the job, or this will start. When I say to break them, I don't mean like break them completely, but these will be the things that add up over time. And
Yeah.
there's that quote out there, right? That you can be eaten by a bear or you can be pecked to death by ducks, right? Which one is a more painful death? And we know which one. And I think right now we just stand at a critical time in our, especially us, in our region, as to how we're going to respond to this,
Yeah.
especially leaders. Like you have the chance to step up and be empathic and to be a leader that changes the course of your officers' mental health, of your firefighters' mental health, of your dispatchers, your paramedics, everyone's mental health.
Yes. Yes. Because the other thing, you're right, especially in our region, and if you're in a region in the part of the country where you've had lots of events that have occurred, what happens is these layers develop. And again, we're already in a stressful time, but these layers develop where we're just still mudding through the waters. And we don't really get a chance to breathe to handle them. Or we say, no, we're good, bud. We're good, chief. We're good, Sarge. We're good. And we keep going and we keep going. And eventually something's going to break that camel's back to where you're not good anymore. You're not okay. And what's important to know is that it's okay to not be okay. You're not crazy. You're not, you're not going to lose your badge or gun. Well, I can't say you're, totally not, but most likely not.
Yeah.
That's why we need to be proactive in the fact that if you're feeling off, let's do something about it.
Exactly.
There's another piece here I think it's important you kind of mention is doing something quicker rather than later. But most people have what's called, especially medical and first responders, they have a delayed response with their symptoms. And their delayed response after an event, because they go back to work, they keep, again, I got to keep going. I have to respect the badge. I have to honor that person or whatnot. And that delayed response, from what I normally notice, is 3 to 6 months. Yep. And what's important is that delayed response. If you don't get treatment quickly, you're actually going to do your brain and body more damage. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's maybe even a little longer in police.
Yeah, I was trying to give them a little credit, but
hey, they're all tough, right? But I think a lot of that comes from, well, a lot of different things. But you see a lot of stuff on this job, right? And a lot of stuff that you say, okay, next, right?
And when are they going to have the time? When are they going to have the time to make a call?
Exactly. And we have to get deliberate about it, right? And I think that's important to start having these conversations about changing protocols after events that are stressful, that are deemed critical, right? Because we know, like, yes, like we can get in and we can do helpful support, but there's a certain time window that is really essential that, okay, after that critical incident, maybe it's not what you want to do, but what you need to do is go home and see your family. And you need to follow up with a peer shortly thereafter, right? And then you need to be seeing someone like you or I, it does not have to be you or I,
yeah,
within a few weeks. But when I say someone like you or I, someone who knows the culture, but also someone who is trained in mental health, that's an unbiased third party that's going to be able to get you through this. And if there is something going on, it won't scare them to say, okay, well, let's tackle this and let's handle it, right?
Right. Because there's a definite normal response to tragedy. You are going to go through emotions. And especially, I've had men and women, when they feel that safety, that safety and that trust, they will open up and tell you more things that are really happening. And it's not maybe just about that event, even though that event is, again, that straw that broke the camel's back. There could have been other things. And now we are hopefully then rewinding and rewiring their system to be able to navigate any future minefields.
Absolutely, because if you think of it, that was a neural pathway that's been paved out for a long time. So your brain knows how to get down it super quick, but you also have to know when it's not healthy and when it's not adaptive, right? Because just because we've done something for a long time doesn't mean it should always be done like that.
Very true. Very true. So we have a question here. Somebody asked, why may EMDR not work for somebody?
Well, I think there's lots of different trauma treatments out there, right? And I think it's important to discuss with your therapist the different forms of trauma therapy and the risk and the benefits, right? And to educate yourself on what you feel would be best for you, but educate yourself with someone who also knows what they're doing. And I will say I'm a little biased to EMDR because I've never seen it not work. Um, but also there are other forms of trauma therapy, and Allison can speak to that as well. I think the
Hmm.
only time we have to be really careful with EMDR is if there is a history of dissociative identity disorder. That changes
Hmm.
it a little bit. But that's something that we screen for right away. Like we're not going to get you into EMDR if that's going on.
That, and I also have a patient who was recommended for it, and she was told that she could not do it because of her high risk suicidality. So they did not put her in it. Um, so yes, it just I think depends on what your symptoms are
Hmm.
and the EMDR therapist you are working with. I would probably say that's another big factor.
Right, absolutely. So if someone is experiencing suicidality, it's not bad, but the higher the ideation, we'll say, we'll kind of have to press pause on EMDR because we are activating the amygdala in
Yeah.
EMDR,
Hmm.
and that's just not safe to do at that point in time. Like once it becomes safer, then yes, we could possibly re-engage, but at that point, it's just not safe. It's not clinically sound.
Yeah, I call it like we have this temperature gauge, 0 to 10, 10 being your most stressful, like distressing um, fuse, you can call it. And if you're running at around a 7 to 10, the tools I teach people or the things that we do are going to be very difficult to be impactful because your system's almost on all the check engine lights are on. It's really hard for your system to cool down. So probably very similar with EMDR is like if you're still really, really tense and on edge, which you can do probably some, but if it's like all cylinders are still on hot, the brain and the amygdala and the pathways are probably not going to be able to open all the way to allow the process to work.
Right. So how I compare it is if you're redlining your RPMs, right? How
Oh, yes.
quickly
You're a car
are
girl
you
just like me. I love it.
um how are you going to be able to stop at that stop sign to make that curve, right? Because that's what we're doing in EMDR is there is a metaphor we use in it that we're on a train watching things go by, that you are not actually in this scene, you're on the train watching it go by, that you're stopping and unloading some information and then you're stopping and picking up information as well to process. But how can you do that if the train itself is going 100 miles an hour, right? It's just not safe, if that makes sense.
And then how may someone just have a short relief and then symptoms come back? Is there a thing where, because it doesn't, you're still going to have, um, what's it called? You're never going to forget about it.
Right.
It's basically taking the symptoms and detaching them from you. Again, your central nervous system and helping rewire with the eye movement and desensitizing them. So could it be that after somebody does, the question is, I did EMDR twice with the same person. I had maybe 2 weeks relief and that was it. Is that common?
I would say if you did it for a single critical incident, um, it seems like there's something left, like there's something left unprocessed. Because usually with EMDR, like once we get you to an ecologically sound place, unless there is something that we call a strainer memory or a touchstone memory attached to it, which is there almost always is, um, it's not going to be completely processed. So with that, I would say there might have been more information that needed to be processed, um, whatever that looks like for you. And I would also possibly get curious if it's attached to other things that have happened in the past as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Great questions. Okay. So when we think of, and you had mentioned, identifying an introspective what is happening in our system and navigating that to help stay in control. and what is happening inside somebody. The conversation we're having today about getting more in control. What other things, Sabrina, have you thought of to add to this today that I've missed?
No, there are some tips I would say that I came up with, and when I say I came up with, they came from the book Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. However, a
So
lot of people
really, you came up with them. No, I was kidding.
are,
Emotional survival for law enforcement. Is that by
yeah,
Tania Glenn?
no, that's the resilience book, but this is by
Okay,
Dr. Gil Martin. And I will say people hear that, and if you're a firefighter, EMS, dispatch, you're like, man, whatever. But the truth is, a lot of the information still applies because he talks a lot about the hypervigilance roller coaster, and that happens across the board, right? Regardless of
absolutely.
what your shift looks like. But he mentioned this is at the back of the book, so I'm going to give you a little cheat if you decide to order the book, which is I recommend this for everyone. Survival tips as to how to become an emotional survivor. So some of these, actually most of them are common sense. You just need someone in front of your face, and I'm saying this to myself as well, um, to remind you of it. And a lot of it, especially at this point in time, is you have to be aggressive about your time management, right?
Okay.
Um, Time management and personal goals, staying physically fit, obviously. And I say obviously, but if we're getting real, like we have an increased amount of cortisol happening because we're cooped up, we're stressed, right? So we have
Mm-hmm.
to be releasing that somehow, some way, in a way that's healthy. I'll put that caveat on it. Um, so working out, spirituality is really important, really, really important. Whatever that looks like for you, whatever faith or spirituality, we know that that can often anchor a person. So how can we get deliberate about incorporating that into our rhythm, our routine, right? Because we know, just as people in general, it's not like these big crazy things that lead to overall great health, right? It's rhythms that we have. It's
Mm-hmm.
getting into rhythm, maintaining that is your best friend. So, time management, staying physically fit, staying connected to your spirituality or your faith, your personal relationships. I will say, I will give you a 24-hour kind of veg time because that's what he mentions in the book is you have this hypervigilance roller coaster where you're up here for 24, 36, 12, whatever your shift looks like, right? The whole time. But then after that, your body knows it's safe and it plummets, right? All those, the adrenaline, the cortisol, they plummet and you veg for at least 24 hours, right?
Right. Yeah, the
Um,
studies that I look at says, around 30 hours, so 24 to 30 hours, depending on how your shift was, right? Depending on
exactly,
how many runs, yeah, everything that you've experienced.
exactly. And so I think it's really, really important to know that A, that's normal, but
Mm-hmm.
B, you don't have to live there after that time, right? You have to
Mm.
have some kind of transition routine that signals to your brain and to your body that, okay, I'm checking back in to just being a person right now. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean you neglect the other side of you. It does not mean that at all. But you have to have some kind of transition routine that signals, like, okay, I'm checking back into being present with my wife and kids, right? I'm checking back into these other roles in my life because I do have other roles outside of this, right? Because we know that
Mm-hmm.
over identification can be a slippery slope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that being a firefighter, whatever police, EMS, dispatch, whatever that is for you, that is critically important. And we need you. We absolutely need you. We need you to fill that role and to have that sense of identity in your life, but also
Yes.
there has to be other parts of your life as well. There has to.
And there
Um,
is other parts of you. It's being able to know that about yourself.
exactly. And feeding those.
Mm-hmm.
Let me hold on a second. What else? Financial well being. A lot of it we already talked about. So right now, we're in an interesting time in
I
our
was about to
country.
say that's a hard one. Financial well-being for everyone is such a tough one.
It is really tough, and I think we just have to get honest and vulnerable to say that it is tough, right? And
Yeah. I mean, I have
right
people, my brother-in-law is losing his job. I have people left and right telling me they're not sure if they're going to lose their house. Like, luckily, I know mortgage companies are putting mortgage payments on pause, and there's companies saying, don't have to pay this month. And I'm just like, but they can only do that for so long.
it's true. And I you have to be careful what you're feeding right now.
Yeah.
Are you feeding your fear or are you feeding hope? And when I say that, I am not glossing over anything that's happening. I'm not. Trust me, I know. But you do have to be very careful of what you're feeding and what you're paying attention to because that's where your
Mm-hmm.
mind will go. And just knowing that, okay, how can I get ahead of this? How can I stay in control of this? And also maybe just knowing like if when you're stressful, you tend to buy more, like, okay, how can I put boundaries on that right now? Or maybe that's not you, but what does it look like to put some boundaries on that at this point in time so you're careful and you're safe?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I just heard you say then through some of the tips uh, that you got from the book Emotional Survivor for Law Enforcement. One, aggressive about your time management. Some personal goals, developing those. Getting physically fit, and that doesn't have to mean you go lift 500 pounds unless you already do that. It's just starting to walk, maybe doing some things for your own health. Looking, into your spirituality. And spirituality doesn't mean religion. Spirituality can mean that you uh, have faith in something, that you believe in something. There's a difference between religion, which is conforming to norms and a specific type of um, I forget, like religion, and
Routine.
then there's
Yeah.
routine, and then there's spirituality, which is a higher power, a higher being, bigger than yourself.
Hmm.
And then personal relationships you had mentioned. So looking into those, how are those positively or negatively affecting you? Your financial well-being, feeding hope instead of fear. And out of all these are ways that somebody can be in more control to navigate that minefield after tragedy.
Right. And I think one important thing that I left out is during this time, it's really important to be proactive instead of reactive. Um, and what does that look like? To know that like everyone handles grief differently, right? So how do I process my own grief in a way that it doesn't become toxic or complicated down the road, right? It doesn't turn into this whack-a-mole game. Essentially, what we allude to that in counseling is if we ignore or deny some of our emotions or our reactions and we just sweep them under the rug, they build pressure and they come out in different ways over time and sometimes really weird ways or ways we
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't expect. So what does it mean to get proactive instead of reactive around grief, around tragedy, but also around stress? Um, because you can't, I would say you can't wait until it happens, but we're here now. So what are we going to do with it? Right. Essentially, when you look into the future, 2 months from now, hopefully it's 2 months. Let's hope for that. What, where do you want to be? Personally, relationally, financially, spiritually, physically, where do you want to be? Because as much as I would like to press a button and just make that happen for you, I can't. So what rhythms do we have to start cultivating to make that happen?
Yeah. What if, somebody just, they don't even, right now, they can't even look at 2 months. It's just
Right.
this tragedy in our community or this tragedy for somebody happen. And it's just today. How can they be proactive today or even starting tomorrow? How can they be proactive, Sabrina?
I think that is an excellent question. And I kind of compare this to if you were injured yourself, right? You're not worried about getting back to the shape you were in right away, right? You are just
Well, I
worried
mean, I do, but
within reason. But right after it happened, right? Right after you're injured,
you
you're
give
not like,
yourself a
oh
little
my
grace.
gosh, when am I going to go do that thing again, right?
Right. When
So
am I going to go lift 200 pounds again? Right. Or,
yeah, I
yeah.
think you have to acknowledge where you are right now and to acknowledge, okay, this sucks, and to let your feelings in day by day. It's important to take it one day at a time, but also if you were injured and let's say you went to the hospital or wherever you went, what do you need? You need time to heal, you need support, and you need medicine. Now, the medicine is going to look a little different for you, right? So, what does your brain and your body and your mind, what do they need to heal right now? And you know that intrinsically, healthy,
Mm-hmm.
keyword healthy, right? Because we often
Mm-hmm.
know what the things are to numb the pain, but the things that numb the pain don't heal the pain, right?
Mm,
So, a lot of it is just, it's a process and accepting it day by day.
yes. And it's really important to know that these tragedies that we've all been through, most of us on this call today. And again, I thank you all for being on here. Um, and if please let us know. Yes, give us a yes if you've ever been through something. You don't have to tell us what, just give us a yes. Um, that they don't leave our minds. We never forget about them. And that's one of the things I think you and I get frustrated with is we'll have people come to us and say, well, I went to a therapist once and they told me just I need to forget about it or I need to quit my job. That
No,
that that doesn't work. I still remember when I was 8 years old losing my grandmother at my birthday. Like there are things you don't forget, but it's
no,
the ability to be able to change the meaning of the story that you're telling yourself about that event and how it has what I call the octopus legs around you, whatever you need, whatever your medicine you need for that is, whether it's treatment, whether it's actual medication, whether it's finding your new purpose or something you want to do to grow from that. And that's how you just start with navigating. And that is the more complex, accelerated version. So for today, starting off, what can somebody do if they're feeling like this event yesterday or an event in their life recently happened or happened a while ago and they just feel so stuck? They're in that stuck point. What can they do?
I think
What can be
support is number one, healthy support, right? Because essentially we all store emotions physically and we're just building that pressure, right? So we need to release the pressure, right? And we probably need to start acknowledging our feelings. That's a very counselor thing of me to say. But when we don't acknowledge them, they build pressure and they get intense and they don't feel good. Like they don't feel good to build up that much. But I would say support is number one, to find a place that you feel safe enough to talk about this stuff. And you'll know, like if you start to bring this up and someone goes, like that's not your person, okay? So who is that for you? And hopefully there's multiple people, but just to start talking about it and just to get support. Literally, that right brain is what we need to activate. I'm a little bit of a nerd about right brain, left brain stuff. Um,
I
and
love it.
as a culture, especially law enforcement, fire, EMS, dispatch, you are really, really, really good in your left brain. Like excellent. Like you have to be, right? But guess what? Emotions, grief, processing, healing doesn't happen in your left brain. It happens in your right brain. And that's just a muscle that we have to start to learn how to use a little bit
Yep.
more. And we might need a little help in the beginning with that. But I say
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost is support, finding someone who is safe that you can actually start talking about this stuff with. And if you don't have that person, that's okay. Reach out to one of us. We can get you connected with that.
Yeah.
Because I think the most important thing is just getting it out there.
Absolutely. So if you are a police officer, a firefighter, EMS, dispatch, military, a spouse, a loved one of somebody in this field that feels like you have no one to turn to, or you have no resources, message us, let us know. We have several different connections all around the state, around the country, and we'd love to be able to get you connected or work with you. So one of the things that Sabrina and I have been working on is she is kind of taking the role as the therapist with a lot of our police officers that we're starting to see more and more of, which is great, and doing more EMDR work in our practice. So if that's something of interest to you as well, you can contact us at info@pinpointvhs.com. And then the other series of things is after tragedy, people start to look at their policies and procedures and try to figure out how can we make it better for the future. And Sabrina, tell us a little bit about your Hold the Line organization that you've created.
Right. So I am in the midst of, well, Hold the Line will become a nonprofit to serve first responders, right? So keyword is that's in the process right now. But ideally, what I want Hold the Line to be is to offer support, if it's financial support, if it's emotional support for first responders who don't have the resources, right? Or they just wouldn't think of it otherwise. And one thing we're thinking about is outdoor retreats. So what does it mean just to get outdoors and just to start talking about this stuff? No, this is not outdoor therapy, but I think it's really important to just get outdoors. First of all, we know that being outdoors, being in green space, just doing physical activity with one another is healing in and of itself. So these 3-day retreats where one day we're on the water, one day we're in the woods hiking, and one day is my personal favorite, uh, doing some trail riding. If that's not your speed, that's okay. Maybe we can do 2 different tracks of it. I don't know. But just getting out and building community and building support with one another. That way, when something like this comes up, you know who to turn to, right? Because
Yes.
that's my big thing is yes, a lot of departments are probably going to be looking at this as to how they can change different things, but also how can we get out ahead of this and make you better before it even happens? Because my thing is I know you all train a ridiculous amount. Fire, EMS, dispatch, law enforcement, you train and you train and you train and you train for things that may happen or may never happen, right? But you're prepared. So how can we start doing that for you, both for your mental and emotional health on the job? Because it's not a matter of when something happens, it's not a matter of if something happens, it's a matter of when something
Right.
happens. Because you're a person, right? And even if it's not something that's job related, something's going to happen outside of there. And so outdoor retreats is one. Really getting proactive and getting in with leadership about
Mm-hmm.
helping them just get educated about the mental health of their officers, of their
Yes.
departments, of their firefighters,
Yeah.
and just education around what that means. And when something happens, a critical incident or whatever, how to respond appropriately,
Mm-hmm.
how to respond in a strength based way. Strength based is
Mm-hmm.
refrain. That leads to results. The other stuff, not so much. I'm not saying it doesn't have
Right.
a time and place because it does, but and then the last part that I kind of been thinking about for a year is this thing called First Line, and it is a faith-based trauma support system. Actually, no, it's not a support system. I'm not supposed to use that word. um, but it's a faith-based trauma treatment. So what it is it's co-led by first responders and a mental health professional, but it is
It's
faith-based.
free, right?
It is free. It is free. Um, and that's the most awesome thing about it is we want to be able to offer these services through Hold the Line for free or a reduced rate, right? Because we know the finances of these departments, especially looking down what we're going to be facing here in a few months. Um, Things aren't going to get any easier, but
No.
life's not going to get any easier as well. So how can we offer these resources to departments that may or may not have accessed them before and really give them the tools they need for the future?
Wonderful. Well, we can't wait for it to actually be up and running. Once you get the IRS go ahead, whenever the heck that's going to be. Yeah, but once it is, we will definitely be having a celebration because it is needed. And I know that between Pinpoint and Hold the Line, we thank you all for watching today. And when you had said something a second ago. Oh, and also remembering, you know, guys, all these things that we talk about today and talking about learning how to navigate the minefield after tragedy is when you be proactive, because we're talking about this because your brain is your most important organ in your body. If you're a firefighter, if you're a police officer, if you're EMS, if you're dispatch, if you're a stay-at-home mom, if you're a construction worker, yes, you may need to use your hands. Yes, you may need to use your back. Yes, you may need to use your legs. But guess what? All those need your brain. And your brain, if we barely anyone is focusing on how you are training your brain. So we offer that. We offer trainings for departments as well and leadership. So again, we want to just let you all know that, and we're trying to do that for you all. So we hope you enjoyed this today, and I thank you very much, Sabrina, for coming on.
Thank you.
Is there anything else to add today?
Not that I can think of, other than
we thought of something.
I know it's a weird time. It's a hard time to be a first responder right now in our country. And I think more than ever, we have to be leaning on each other for support, but also leaning on people like Allison or I or other clinicians who are trained to work with first responders. Is don't be, I won't say too proud to do that, but it's really important. Don't be afraid to access that resource because it's only going to make you stronger.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to share the love, to tag people in these videos, you know, to share them with people, to call your friend up, say, hey, watch this, or tell us if there's something else you want different, because the only way we're willing to share as much as we can. The only way we know what you need is if you tell us, because we're not mind readers. I don't think I am. Are you?
No.
Okay. All right. Maybe Ranger is. Maybe Ranger can be, Ranger is her horse, you guys, and maybe he can read everyone's mind. I don't know.
As long as you have food, I think you can read your mind.
So, again, thank you very, very much. And we all hope that you guys stay safe and, you know, have a blessed day. All right.
Thank you.
Will you add in the comments that book?
Yes, I will do that. Do I just hit the chat button?
Yes.
Okay. I will do that.
Okay, if you can add that book. And then again, if you guys want to reach us, I will put in the comments where you can reach us as well. And if you want to schedule to see Sabrina or myself or have a one-to-one conversation, please let us know.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. All right. Thanks, Sabrina.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.